Today I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite things to talk about, and that is spreadsheets. Thinking about making a video walking you through my reading spreadsheets for a while, but I never knew if it would be wildly interesting or if people would actually want to use the spreadsheet. But I've had a couple of requests over the years, and I feel like I'm finally in a good place with my reading tracker that I'm ready to share what I have now. I've been curating the spreadsheet for years, and it has changed in shape and form over the years, but I now am in a really solid place with the spreadsheet that I use to track everything relating to my reading, whether that is the books I'm buying and if I am actually reading them and how much I'm spending on them, and just my purchasing habits around book buying. I keep track of what books I'm reading, what books I'm planning on reading, what videos I'm planning on posting, what books I'm going to read for those videos. All sorts of things are in this spreadsheet, and I'm excited to take you through it. I've created a copy of my spreadsheet and just cleared it out so it can be a template, and I will have a link for that down below in the description box, and I'll put it in the pinned comment as well in case you want to take that and use it for your own means. Feel free to access it, make your own copy, personalize it, make it yours. I'm going to be going through a lot of different things in this spreadsheet, and I know everyone has their own personal preferences, so I'm just going to show you everything I have, and you can take what you want to take from it. You can leave what you want to leave. If there are certain things that you think that will work well for you, great. Feel free to make the spreadsheet your own. I'm just going to be taking you through my personal process and all the things that I track. So first, let's talk about how I track my book buying. I will create a new tab in my spreadsheet for each year of book buying, and this is the general layout of what it looks like. I just track the book, the author of the book, how much I spent on the book, when I purchased the book, where I purchased the book from, and if I've actually read it or not yet. This just generally helps me keep track of, one, being conscious of how much I'm spending on books because it adds up really quickly, and so it's good to just like keep a pulse on that. And then two, if I'm actually reading the books that I'm buying or if I'm letting them collect dust on my shelves. I've gotten a lot better about that over the years. If you look at my actual filled out template, this is what it looks like with all of the data in it of all the books I've purchased this year, how much I've spent on them, and if I've actually read them. And I've read almost all of them. The only books I haven't read yet are the ones that I just purchased within the past couple of weeks, or Looking Glass Down, which I purchased back in July, which was a pre-order, and that is my book club for my members book club this month. So I haven't read it yet, but I'm planning on reading it in the next 2 weeks, and all of these other books I know I'll be reading very soon as well. So this is just the sort of layout. You can pop your books in here, you can track your authors. You don't have to track author names if you don't want to, but I just find it helps, when you look back on it later. Book titles sometimes sound the same, and it's just nice to remember who the author was for certain books. You can track how much you spent on the book, the date that you purchased it, where you purchased it from, and checking it off when you have read it or not. Now, there are also some features over here on the side that pull this data all together just for some visualizations that will automatically fill out as you are adding books. So we have some pivot tables here to track total monthly spending for each month, which will automatically fill out as you add more books in. We also have average monthly spending, which will take the average price per book, so that you can also get a sense of, on average, is your cost per book going up over time because you're starting to prioritize a different retailer, or is it going down over time because you've started buying from bargain stores, if that's something you care to keep track of. And then even farther over, we'll have some line graphs that will represent that as well. Again, feel free to make it your own. You don't want this stuff, just delete it out, but I like to have some visualizations of that. And then I also have a progress tracker and a pacing tracker down here as well. So as you are adding books over here, it will add up the total amount of books that you have purchased this year. And then as you check off the read box, it will track how many you read. So you can always have a pulse of, have I read 25% of the books I purchased so far? Have I read 80% of the books I've purchased so far? And then also a pacing tracker is just helpful for me to keep track of how many unread books I have at any given time and how long it would take me to actually read all of them. This has been really instrumental in helping me slow down my book buying and get to a normal kind of book buying pace. Back when I had a lot of books on my TBR, I could look at this and it would say, it's gonna be 18 months before you can even get through all the books you have. And I'm like, why would I buy more books if I have 18 months worth of reading? And the way that this works is it will keep track of all of the unread number of books based on how many books you've added over here. And you can change this variable here for average books that you read per month. For me, it's usually about 10, so I just put 10. You could override it with 8 if your number is 8. You could override it with 3 if your number is 3. And then it will do the math to tell you on average how many months it's going to take you to read through all those books. Obviously right now there's only one unread book in here, so that's why it's so small. But if you were to add a lot more books, you would see those numbers start to change. For example, over in my personal tracker right now, I have purchased 39 books this year. I've read 34 of them so far, which is about 87%. And that leaves me with 5 books that are unread, which will take me less than a month to finish. Next up is my reading log tracker. This is where I track all the books that I read each month and some certain attributes about them. So for the sake of the template, I just added 10 books per month and went ahead and formatted it like this. You can obviously add rows, delete rows, whatever you need to track all of your books, however many you end up reading per month. This is what mine looks like filled out right now for the year. You can see all the books I've read and what it looks like when it is fully completed. I also did make a couple small tweaks just for the sake of template, just to make language a little more clear, because I've been using this tracker for years on my end. And something like this column I just call status, but for the template I decided to call it reading status just to clean it up a little bit. So there's a couple little minute changes I made just for the sake of making this easier to understand. But all I put in here is the title of the book, the author. I have these columns frozen so that as you scroll, that will stay with you as you get all the way over. Reading status, the statuses I track are if it is on my TBR, if I've read it, if I'm currently reading, or if I ended up DNFing it. Usually I will plan out my reading for the month a little bit ahead, especially if I know that I have books that I'm going to need to read for book clubs or whatnot. So that's why TBR is a status in here, because sometimes I'll just go ahead and fill out like 3 or 4 books that I know I'm going to want to read, or if I'm trying to plan ahead for certain months, I have that in there as well. Then star rating, you can customize this and fill it out as you like. I rate my books on a scale of 1 to 5, so you can just custom enter if you rated it a 4, if you rated it a 4.25, if you rated it a 1, whatever you want, you can just enter that number there. I also track the release year of the books that I'm reading. Again, you could just enter this 2022, 2023, whatever it is that you're entering. Library status is my personal library. I like to track whether I own these books or not. And so these are the categories that I have for my tracker. One is just own it, I own the book. I also have need to buy it or won't buy it. These are for books that I read as like arcs on NetGalley. And if I read an arc of an ebook and I really love it, then I mark it as need to buy it. So I know that I want to buy a physical copy of it. If I read it and I didn't love it, then I just mark it as won't buy it. I don't really feel the need to own that one. And again, you can change this to whatever works for you. If you want to track it as ARC or ebook or whatever it is, you can definitely do that in this column if you want. But I also have this column for medium, which tracks how I read the book, whether it was physical, ebook, or audiobook. Those are the general formats that I'm usually reading my books in. I also track the genre, so I will just type these in if I read a thriller, or if I read a horror, or if I read an anthology, but it's primarily horror, I might categorize it something like that. This is just how I keep track of what genres I'm reading throughout the year. Audience is where I track if it was an adult, young adult, or a middle grade book. These 2 columns are where I'm tracking the diversity of what I'm reading. So if it's a book with BIPOC representation or LGBTQIA+ representation, I will just mark it as yes. I don't usually fill out the no's. I just leave it blank if it's a no. And then that will highlight these so I can keep a sense of being intentional with reading from a lot of different groups. I also like to have this conditional format so that it highlights green just because it's more visually alerting. Like it'll help me see it better to make sure that I am reading diversely. Then I have reason read, which for me is usually one of these categories. I either read it because it's an arc that a publisher sent me, it's a book club pick for myself, or another person's book club I'm participating in. Personal choice is books I'm just reading because I want to. Video project, if I am reading a book specifically to include it in a video that I'm doing on YouTube. And then 24-hour horror-a-thon for my buddy reads for the read-a-thon that I host. If I am reading a book for a video project, I will usually put the video in here as well, just to keep track of like, was it my summer-ween reading blog that I read all of these books for, or whatever it is. It just is something I like to look back on, so I track that. Then I have a notes column, which is just, you know, generally whatever you want if you feel like you need a notes column. And I used to be a lot better about including review commentary in my spreadsheet, but I got really lazy about doing that. But I would love to get back on putting little review commentary in here. I would just usually write pretty short things, a quick synopsis of the book, what I liked, what I didn't. But again, feel free to use it if you want, feel free to not use it if you don't want. Then for the people who like reading stats and looking at their stats of what they're reading, I do have a stats tab that just takes a lot of pivot tables of the data from the reading log, and this will automatically fill out as you are adding books to your reading log. You can customize it to include different things if you want, but this is kind of generally what I look at. Here's the example for my filled out reading log, which will be better to look at. We have my genre breakout for all of the books that I have read so far this year. I do filter these tables by the reading status being read, so I'm not looking at books on my TBR or books that I DNF. I'm just looking at books that I actually read. You can filter that however you choose if you like. But here's where I track how much I'm reading of different genres throughout the year, which I just like to keep in my mind just to see if I'm reading maybe fewer horror books than I thought I was, or romance is one in particular that's interesting to look at because it keeps getting smaller and smaller each year. Then I track my BIPOC and LGBTQIA representation here. So far about 32% of the books I've read have had BIPOC authors and 16% have had LGBTQIA plus authors or representation. Then one of my favorite things to track as a creator is the reason I'm reading books and how my average rating changes by the reason that I read the book. If you're not a creator and you're not reading books for different reasons, this might not be as useful to you, or I'm sure there's ways you could find to track it and make it useful for you as well. Like if you participate in multiple people's book clubs, you could track which book club you are reading books for, and then you can see, do I tend to love this person's book club picks? Do I tend to hate this person's book club picks? Should I keep reading their book club picks? Is this one that I definitely want to make sure I don't miss? But for me, what I look at is, again, these reasons that I'm reading books. Most of the books I read are for a video project, which is 42%. 25% of the books I read are for my own personal choice. 19% are ARCs. 9% are for book clubs, and 3% is for the 24-hour horror-a-thon, which makes sense. That's the smallest because that only comes every other month and there's just one buddy read for that book club. But what I really like to look at paired with this is my average star rating based on these things. So out of all the books I've read for the 24-hour horror-a-thon, that has the highest average star rating of a 4.0, which is kind of crazy that I've had such good luck with my buddy reads for that. I always end up really enjoying those books, and that makes me feel good about the books that I'm choosing, but also that you're choosing, because I always give you a couple books to choose from and we always read whatever's voted on, and you guys have impeccable taste. It's also interesting to see next up being books I'm reading for a personal choice having the next highest star rating of a 3.67 and being higher than books that I'm reading for video projects or for ARCs that I'm reading or for book clubs. Book clubs actually have the lowest average star rating. That includes my own book club and other people's book clubs I participate in, and I could get more granular in how I track that to see like how my own personal book club books end up being rated, how other people's book clubs end up being rated. But this is not too surprising to me because I've had a couple duds in a row with my book club, which is unfortunate. But I especially like to pay attention to how personal choice and video project compete against one another and which I'm reading more for. I do read so many books for videos, and I want to make sure that I'm not reading books I'm not enjoying because I'm trying to force them into videos. And they're really not that far off, a 3.47 versus a 3.67. Like, I feel good about that now, but there has definitely been times when that has been weighted in far different directions, and it's just good for me to keep an eye on. The next tab is the posting schedule tab. This is where I track my YouTube videos. So if you also have a YouTube channel, this might be useful for you. If you have a Bookstagram, it might be useful for you. If you are not a digital creator, I don't know how useful this will be for you. So again, take it and leave it. Choose what you like. But I just filled this out with some examples of what my filming schedule will typically look like. I plan out each month in little segments, and I usually have a couple of months in advance of planning. The things that I track, this first column is date filming. I used to schedule my filming a lot more particular. I don't really do that anymore. But there is this column if you need to plan like, oh, I only can film on Saturdays. So let me, make sure I can always get my videos filmed in enough time that I have time to edit it to get it live when I want it to be. Then you can use this. I also have status, which is backlog, filming, editing, ready to film, ready to edit, ready to upload and draft, publish, need scripting. Choose, whatever you want. If that is too many statuses for you, then you can always come in and edit these and remove any that don't make sense for you, or you can add any if you want to change them or change the wording of them or change the color coding of them. You have a lot of options here. Next is the video concept, which is usually just the title of the video. I also have some color coding in here because I like to be able to see how many reading vlogs I'm doing in a month. So I have some conditional formatting to highlight the cells yellow if it includes the words reading vlog, and to highlight the cells purple if it includes the word members, just so I can keep track of my membership videos, which are reading sprints and book clubs that I do every month. And I just like to make sure that I'm including that in every month when I need to. I also have video notes, so usually this will be a couple of the books I need to read for it, or if I start working on a thumbnail, I add the link to the thumbnail here so I don't forget what my thumbnail is going to be. Or if I'm going to be doing a video based on some research, I'll add the link to whatever I'm going to be talking about in here. It's just like any materials that you need for your video planning. Then obviously my posting date is in here as well. I typically do about 2 videos a week, so I map out all my posting dates and when I know videos will go live as I'm planning ahead, so I can look at how many videos I need to publish in the next month, how many of those should be reading vlogs, how many need to be members videos, what can I plug in between. And then I also like to track my subscriber count through the videos I'm posting. So I just filled this out with completely made up information just for the sake of seeing what this looks like. But I will add my subscriber count at the time of posting the video in this column every time I post a video, so that if I posted this video, for example, on April 11th and I had 11,014 subscribers, then when I go to post my next video on April 14th, say I have 1,120, I can see how many subs were added from that video, theoretically. It's just kind of like a made up math. But between these dates, there were 6 extra subscribers. So I just like to track generally like how my sub count is changing, or if there's any moments that there's a large influx, if that's related to a certain video topic, that kind of gives me a signal like, oh, people were really interested in that, or the YouTube algorithm loved that video. Let me try to figure out a different way to spin that video and do it again. Helpful if you're a creator, probably not useful at all if you are not. I finished filming the video and then I forgot this one other piece of this spreadsheet that I wanted to show you, of this tab. So I'm gonna edit this in here as well. But another part of this tab that I like I said, I will plan videos just a couple months in advance, sometimes further out in advance than others, but I always know like, okay, I'm gonna have reading vlogs, I'm gonna have thriller recommendations every couple of months. Like I always have stuff to slot in, but sometimes I just have video ideas that I don't know when they're going to fit or how I would execute them, but they just seem really interesting to me and I don't want to lose track of them. And so at the bottom of this spreadsheet, I will also have this backlog of videos that I keep down here, and this is ginormous. On my actual tracker, I probably have over 100 backlog video ideas between book recommendation videos, I want to film fun reading vlogs I like to do, creative video ideas or video essays I would like to do if I ever have more time to really try to figure it out. So down here is where I'll just put any ideas that I'm like, oh my gosh, that is a great video idea, but I don't know when I'm gonna slot that in. I will just fill this out with however much information I need. And then whenever I feel like it's a good time, I can pull from this as I am planning out months in advance. So some months I'll be planning a month and I'm like, okay, I know I need to do my wrap up. I know I'm going to do a reading vlog for new thriller books. I know I'm going to do a sit down recommendation video, but I have a couple slots open where I don't know what the video will be. I will scroll down to my video backlog and I'll be like, oh, this is really seasonal and that would be a good topic to pull up here. Or, oh, this is gonna be a bigger effort video, but I actually have the time to do that this month. So let me pull that up here. So I like to keep that a little bit separate, of these being like ideas that I just don't know when they're gonna happen, that I can pull in while I am planning the months in advance. The next 2 tabs are also very booktuber centric. The first one is this video planning tab. This is just where I kind of plan out what I'm going to be including in my videos really far in advance. So if I can see in my posting schedule, like, okay, I've got a thriller recommendation video here and a horror book recommendation here and this like niche topic here that I want to do, I will start planning those ahead as far in advance as I can, just so that I'm always like adding to my ideas. So I would put the video idea here, say it was like horror book recommendations for beginners. I'll just make that up. I will start popping in book titles as soon as I have ideas about them. So that could be like, I'm gonna recommend Dracula, and maybe like Home Before Dark by Riley Sager, which is sort of thriller, sort of horror. Maybe I'm going to recommend a Darcy Coates book. I can start drafting these notes here so that I can always come back and add to it. Maybe add links to the Goodreads pages here, whatever it is. I kind of just customize this as I'm going, but if I want to always be working ahead, this is just kind of where I draft some notes. And then the next tab is a single video script. So I left this filled out just for example with something I was working on recently where I was thinking about doing a video reading weird books. And so if I'm trying to brainstorm an idea for a single video and I'm just trying to pick some books for it, or I'm just trying to see what books I'm most interested in, I kind of do this little thing. I don't know if this is interesting to anyone, but this was an example that never ended up going through, so I just thought it'd be a good one to show you. I was thinking about reading weird books, and so I was just pulling all these weird books in that I could find on Goodreads that I thought sounded interesting to me. And then I just pulled in some data around them, like their average rating on Goodreads, the page count for them, and then I scored them with my own interest rating and also a weird rating on a scale of 1 to 5, just for how I thought it sounded interesting or not and how weird I thought it sounded. Then I just multiplied these numbers together to get to a score so that I could sort these by the highest score, with some quick notes about the plot and the Goodreads link just for quick reference. And this is kind of how I pick, like if I'm doing a themed reading vlog and I'm trying to figure out what am I the most interested in and what best fits the theme based off of the information I can find about it, this is what my voting process looks like. So if I had gone through with this, I probably would have read these 3 books for a weird book reading vlog, which I could still do because I have not read any of these books yet. And I don't know if this is an interesting process to anyone, but it's a part of my spreadsheet, so I figured I would show it. Next up is my goals tracking tab. It is very simple. Some people have a very mapped out goals trackers. Mine is very, very easy. I just place the goal, the date I accomplished the goal, and I check it off when I have done that. So if I have a goal around working with a certain sponsor for a video and I just really want to make that a goal for the year, or if I have a goal to receive an ARC from a certain publisher and I'm trying to like build a relationship with the publisher, maybe I would place that in here. I also have like personal goals that I put in here sometimes. When I have goals working around writing short stories or something, like I'll just put them in here and track it. But this is it. This is what my goals tracking looks like. It's very simple. I usually don't have too many goals going at a time, but this is about what it looks like. Next up is my announcements tab. This is how I keep track of all the things I need to announce, and to be honest, I kind of stopped using it recently because I didn't like using it very much, but if it's something that you as a creator find to be a helpful format, then feel free to make it your own. But this was, as I was starting this year, I started my membership for the first time, my channel membership, which includes my book club and reading sprints, and I also have the 24-hour horror-a-thon, and then I just have other stuff going on, and I was worried that I was going to get behind on announcing things on time. So I just made this tracker so I could track what projects it was, what month it was coming up, and what I needed to announce, which was sometimes like voting for things, or announce when reading sprints were happening, or just announce what buddy reads were, those sorts of things. And I'd give myself a deadline to post it and then just track if it was complete or if it was still in the backlog that I hadn't gotten to it yet. But it was really useful for a little bit, but I don't really find that I need it anymore. It's been easier now to keep track of everything now that I'm used to it. So not something I use super heavily, but was helpful for helping me keep myself organized when I had a lot of new things going on for the first time. Next is my most anticipated books tracker. I make a new one of these for every year, and I just track the release month for the book as soon as I hear about it, the title of the book, the author, my representation tabs here for BIPOC or LGBTQIA+ authors or representation, the genre of the book, the link to Goodreads, and then I track if I own the book or not and if I've read the book or not. So this is what the completed tracker looks like as my example for this year. You can see all the books that I was keeping an eye on and all the different categories that I was looking at as well. And then you can see how I track whether or not I end up owning the book and actually reading the book or not. And I just put a little tag here if I DNF'd it, just to remember that I did give the book a try. But this is just generally how I check in and see, like, am I actually following up on the books that I was interested in? Or sometimes you just forget about a book. Like, it was an anticipated book to you when you first heard about it, and then you forget that it ever existed. And so sometimes I'll come in here and I'll just filter this down to all of my unread books and see, like, oh, what came out in January that I was excited about, but I still haven't even gotten around to reading it. Am I okay with that? Like, for some books, like How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix, after I heard reviews of it, I was like, yeah, I don't think I want to read that. So I'm okay that I didn't end up actually reading that one. But other times you'll see books in here that you're like, oh man, I really was excited about. I keep my exoskeletons to myself and I just never heard anyone talk about it and I forgot about it, but I really do want to follow up on it. final tab that I have in here is my ARC request tab. This is where I just keep track of the books that I'm requesting from publishers to receive early copies of. So if that's something that you do as well, I find this really useful just to keep a track of what I have out there in the world. I'm typically requesting ARCs in one of two ways. I'm either requesting the book on NetGalley, or I'm requesting the book through a form fill that comes from being on the publisher's list, and then they'll send out a form of all the books that are coming out that season, and you can respond with which ones you're interested in, and sometimes you get them and sometimes you don't. I used to also do cold outreach to publishers where I would just find a publicist to reach out to and request a book. I don't really do that much anymore. I have had success doing that, so I do recommend that if you are a creator and you're trying to make some connections and request some books. I don't find that I care enough to do that right now because it's just a little bit of work to have to like figure out who the right person is to reach out to and then craft the email, and then, you know, I don't know. It's more work that I'm interested in right now, but I used to do that too, so I would track that in here as well. But I will just track the name of the book, the date that it is going to be published, who the publisher is, who the contact is, and their contact email. So that became more relevant when I was reaching out to people. And it was really great too if you're like, okay, I remember when I requested this book from Tor back in January, I reached out to this person and this was their email, and they did end up sending me that book, so I'm gonna reach out to them again for this new book that's coming out. Like, it's just nice to have your own little database of contacts to reach out to. And then I also track the status of my outreach with them, whether I've started that outreach or not, if I'm in outreach with them, if I was denied the book, if I received the book, it was a success, if I filled out a form. And sometimes you just get no response and it's been a couple months and the book's already out, and I just archive that and I just say, well, that never got a response. I also have last contacted, so that's either the date that I requested the book on NetGalley, the date I filled out a form, or the date that I sent an email. And then I also track if I've actually read the books, especially for books that come in as a success. I want to make sure that I'm actually reading those ARCs that I'm receiving, and so I will come in and you can filter to everything that says success and see like, okay, I've gotten 10 ARCs this year. Like, did I actually read most of them? Or especially if you're planning on reaching back out to a publisher, it's good to follow up and be like, well, they sent me a book before, but I didn't read it, so I should probably read that book before I reach out to them again. So that's it for my ginormous reading spreadsheet that tracks book purchases, reading books, scheduling of posts, ARCs, most anticipated books, all of the things. I track so many things in here. The spreadsheet has really expanded over the years just to perfectly accommodate all the things that I like to track related to my bookish world. Hopefully this will be useful for some people. If so, you can grab that link down below, make your own copy, and make it into whatever you want. I'm sure some people will just want the reading tracker, or some people will just want, you know, different parts of it, but I just wanted to share everything so that you can take any pieces of it that you find useful. And I think I have a pretty relatively simple tracking system, especially when it comes to the stats. I've seen some spreadsheets out there that are really, really complex, and I do love stats and I do love spreadsheets, but I also love simplicity. So if you are also someone who sees all these spreadsheets out there and you're like, that's just a little bit too overwhelming for me, I just need something a little simpler, hopefully this was a good, easy, entry-level spreadsheet for you to take and make your own. If you do decide to use the spreadsheet, let me know down in the comments below what you found useful, and let me know if you just liked this style of video of kind of showing you a behind the scenes of my bookish world. There are definitely more things that I could give you peeks behind the curtain into, so if there's anything you're interested in seeing, you can comment that down below as well, and it will end up on my tracker spreadsheet as a video idea. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!